Jets preseason begins tomorrow, and believe it or not, Justin Fields' play is the least important part of this game for the Jets. Locked On Jets begins now.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Friday, August 8th, 2025, and I'm your host, John B. from GangGreenNation.com. Thanking you so much for making the show your first listen or first watch every day. A big shout out to you everydayers. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets with new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. On today's show, we are previewing the Jets preseason debut tomorrow night. The Jets will be at Lambeau Field to take on the Green Bay Packers. Kickoff time is scheduled for 8 p.m. The game will be shown locally on WLNY. That's channel 10 and 55 in New York. And it's been a long wait for Jets football. The last time the Jets took the field was in January. It was a victory at MetLife Stadium over the Miami Dolphins, a game that really did not have much meaning for the Jets. The Dolphins were still alive for a playoff spot as they took the field that day. It turned into a pretty easy Jets win. And the Jets team that takes the field tomorrow night in Green Bay will look very different. The last time the Jets were on the field, Aaron Rodgers was the quarterback. Devontae Adams was at wide receiver. Hassan Reddick was playing defensive end. Jeff Ulbrich was the coach. And those are just some of the changes that have taken place since we last saw the Jets play a game. Now, of course, this game is only an exhibition game. It does not count in the standings. So I think you have to look at this game differently than you would a regular season game. Now, the player who's going to be the most scrutinized on the field for the New York Jets tomorrow night will be Justin Fields, the new quarterback who the Jets signed this offseason. He was the big addition from the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Jets got him early in free agency. I'm sure every movement he makes on the field, as soon as he steps on the field to warm up, will be analyzed under a microscope by the fan base and by the media. And Aaron Glenn announced yesterday that the Jets starters will play in this game. Now, he did not say how long they will play. I would imagine they're not going to play that deep into the game. Usually, if you play your starters deep into a preseason game, it's not the first game. You know, it could be the second game. It could be the third game. I don't expect any Jet starters to be playing into the second quarter. And this leads me into a point that I'm sure will be controversial, but I think it is the biggest thing you should remember going into this game. How Justin Fields plays in this game is simply just not a big deal. I know he's the quarterback. I know he's the most important player for the Jets this year. I know this is the first time we will see him on the field in a Jets uniform. There are things that will matter tomorrow night when the Jets play the Packers. There will be takeaways that we will have. And we'll talk about some of the things that you should watch for ahead here on the show. Justin Fields' performance is just not that important. And I say that for a couple of reasons. Number one, you have to remember, this is tuning up for the regular season. I was happy when I saw that Glenn announced that the starters are playing in the preseason, because that's something, look, I want to be fair here. I don't want to be consistent. That was something I criticized Robert Saleh for. I felt that under Saleh, the Jets had a lot of sluggish starts in week one games. And I wondered, was this team really ready to play? Did this team utilize the exhibition season to its fullest extent? I don't think they did. And look, there's always a risk when you set foot on a football field. People could get hurt. And if the Jets suffer an injury to a key player tomorrow night, you're going to hear nonstop criticism of Aaron Glenn. But I don't think that will be fair, because you have to find a balance. You can't live in constant fear that somebody could get hurt, because you also have to prepare for the season. You know, these games are about getting ready for the season. And if you're not going to use these games to get your starters into football shape, to start practicing your playbook, what's the point of even having these games? I'm happy that Aaron Glenn's playing his starters, and I'm happy Justin Fields will take the field tomorrow as the Jets starting quarterback. But this is about preparation. And yes, it would be great if Justin Fields came out and executed at a high level. But let's say Fields takes the Jets down the field in 5 plays and scores a touchdown, then leaves. That doesn't mean that Justin Fields is now the franchise quarterback for the Jets. Let's say Fields really struggles. Let's say he throws an interception on his first pass, then the Jets have a 3-and-out, then he leaves the game. That doesn't mean Justin Fields is doomed. You know, if a quarterback has a good first series in a regular season game, that doesn't mean he was going to have a great game. If he throws an interception on his first pass, that doesn't mean he was on his way to having a terrible game. This is not a full game worth evaluating. This is going to be a couple series. When would you ever judge a quarterback on a couple of series? I mean, maybe like that Geno Smith game where he threw 3 picks and 3 interceptions and 8 passes in the first quarter back in 2014. But you would never offer a full judgment on a quarterback's play based on 2-3 series. But that's what we do in the preseason. And you have to remember, this as much as anything is getting the Jets ready for the season. You want to get your mistakes out of the way in the preseason. I think one of the benefits for the Jets taking the field tomorrow night with their starters is they can see the things that they need to work on. They can see what works well, and they can see, if a play doesn't work well, now we can go back to the practice field and work on getting this thing right. And that's the benefit in preseason. It's not about, putting up huge numbers. I remember, I can go back through the years. In 2021, Zach Wilson played a pretty good first game against the Giants in the preseason. And I saw people declare he's our franchise quarterback. It was like one exhibition game for Zach Wilson. In 2019, the Jets played the Giants again in the first game of the preseason. That was Adam Gase's first year. The Jets stormed down the field with their first team offense on the first drive. They scored a touchdown, and I saw this nonstop talk about how the Jets have an offensive genius in Adam Gase, how this offense is going to do big thing this year. That was the Adam Gase year. I don't, enough said. I don't need to go through the stats to tell you how bad the Jets offense was that year. One preseason drive made people go crazy about it. I could go back 23 years to 2002. The Jets looked untouchable in the preseason that year. They won all of their preseason games. They were clicking on both sides of the ball, the starting units, and they went out and started 1-4. And the Jets ended up winning the division in 2002, but it was after a 1-4 start that led to a quarterback change when Chad Pennington came in. And Vinny Testaverde played really well in that preseason. He was benched very early in the 2002 campaign. Keep everything in perspective. Remember that the Jets are not game planning tomorrow night. The Jets are not trying to figure out how they can get the best matchups, how they can get Garrett Wilson matched up against the worst Packers corner. The Jets are not going to school this week trying to figure out the best plays to run against the Packers defense. The Jets are not trying to scout Green Bay's defensive tendencies. That may come in a few weeks if the Jets actually have a quote unquote dress rehearsal game where they do the game planning and the starters play into the second half. But that's not going to happen in this game. This game is essentially a glorified practice. And it's a good thing to have this practice because in today's NFL, the training camps are far less intense than they were 20 years ago. They're far less intense than they were 15 years ago. It's something the players negotiated. There was the players' right to negotiate it. There's no more 2 practices a day. In the NFL, you used to have morning practice and afternoon practice at training camp. That's no more. You used to be able to hit. It used to be pretty much simulating games in training camp. That doesn't exist anymore. So these are really the only reps you have that actually simulate a true football game. And it's an opportunity for guys to get comfortable in the system. Aaron Glenn, Tanner Engstrand, Steve Wilkes, they're putting in new systems this year. And Fields, you wanted him to get a mastery of the Jets offense. And look, that's not going to happen because he plays a couple preseason series, but it'll get him into better conditioning. It'll get him into more of a game focus by having him out there and playing against an opponent in real time. And maybe there's 1 or 2 plays where you go back to the drawing board. You say, this one worked really well. We should make this one of our staple plays because everybody seems really comfortable executing this at a high level. Maybe there's a play that doesn't work. Maybe a guy runs a route the wrong way. And you can go back and say, you know what? I'd rather this guy run the route the wrong way in Green Bay against Green Bay in preseason week 1 than against Pittsburgh regular season week 1. That's what this is all about. It's not about, evaluating what Justin Fields' stats are. I talked yesterday about how crazy it is that people are evaluating Justin Fields' training camp numbers. Well, this is only like a half step above that. If you go crazy about what he does tomorrow night, there are things that matter in this game for the New York Jets. How Justin Fields plays, it may sound crazy to you, but it may sound like a hot take to you. I don't think it is. I don't think Justin Fields' performance makes that big of a difference one way or another. We will not be able to truly evaluate Justin Fields until he plays multiple regular season games, real game planning, opponents going full speed, opponents playing their starters the whole game. That's when we'll find out about Justin Fields. We're not going to find out about Justin Fields in 1 or 2 series tomorrow. Now, here on the Locked On Jets podcast, let's talk about the things that are actually important because there are certain players who are going to be making their debuts or debuting a new version of themselves. And it's our first opportunity to see whether or not they'll be able to contribute to the Jets in 2025. We'll talk about who some of those players are as we continue here on this Friday edition of Locked On Jets. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. And Monarch Money is more than just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. I have to be honest with you, one of the things I'm worst at is setting up subscriptions and forgetting about them. Sometimes I stop using the product or the streaming service that I subscribed for. Well, Monarch Money can help you avoid that situation and help you in so many other ways. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by Yahoo Fantasy. It's the best time of year. NFL kickoff is almost here, and that means fantasy football season's back in full swing. And this year, Yahoo Fantasy is turning things up with a fantasy football experience like never before. This year, me and Locked On Jets are playing Yahoo Fantasy, and you should too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran making your millionth league. I played Yahoo Fantasy for over 2 decades, and the updates they're rolling out this month are wild, and I mean that in the best way. To celebrate 28 years of fantasy football greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days throughout August. To kick it off, they just dropped Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine Leagues, a killer new way to play fantasy football on Yahoo, where the lowest scoring team gets eliminated each week until there's one team left standing. With the season just around the corner, now's the time to get your league together and give this new mode a try. If you're more into the classics, you can still play the head-to-head private leagues or join a public league. Stay tuned for more killer announcements and start playing Yahoo Fantasy Football now at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. Thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listen or first watch every day. And a big shout out to you everydayers. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets with new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. The Jets open the 2025 preseason tomorrow night. Kickoff time scheduled for 8 p.m. Jets and the Packers at Lambeau Field. The game will be shown locally on WLNY, channel 10 and 55 in New York. And as I mentioned in the first segment, I don't think Justin Fields' play really matters all that much in this game. But I do think there are players out there whose performance is significant for the New York Jets. And part of the reason I don't think Fields matters that much is that it takes a really long time to evaluate quarterbacks. Whereas there are other spots where it's easier to evaluate in a small sample size. Now, let me start out with the caveat that we should not draw any definitive conclusions about any player based on what happens in tomorrow's game. But I do think there are players who are going to be easier to judge after this game. And I think we could start on the offensive line, talking about the 2 bookend tackles for the New York Jets, Olu Fashanu and Armand Membou. These are the last 2 players the Jets have drafted in the first round. The Jets took a pretty unconventional step the last 2 years under 2 different front offices, but the Jets have used back-to-back first-round picks on the tackle position, something I think more teams should do in the NFL. Because tackle is critical. It's hard to find, guys. There's no good tackles available in free agency. And if you hit on 2 tackles, you don't have to worry about one of the biggest problems NFL teams have. You will not have that problem for 8 to 10 years. Membou and Fashanu are, I think, if Justin Fields is the most important player for the 2025 Jets, Membou and Fashanu are 2 and 3 and in some order. Because if these guys play to their potential, and these are both guys who were drafted with top 11 selections, so there's clearly a lot of upside there. If these guys can play at a high level, the Jets are going to win games, and the Jets offense will be able to move the ball, because I think we should be pretty confident what the Jets can do in the interior of the offensive line with John Simpson. We're presuming Joe Tippmann, maybe Josh Myers, and Elijah Vera Tucker. And if you add 2 quality tackles to that mix, Jets will be able to control the point of attack. And having a good offensive line doesn't guarantee you're going to be a great team, but it's tough to be a bad team. It's tough to be an awful offense when you have high-end offensive line play. Now, it's not just about the numbers, because I know people always obsess about, like the PFF grade and, how many pressures you give up. But as much as anything, I think in these preseason games, it's about the eye test. It's about isolating how individual players are doing. When the regular season comes around, I'm focused on how the Jets play as a team. I'm focused on I'm focused on the offense, the entire unit of the offense, the entire unit of the defense. But I think in the preseason games, you should focus more on individual players. And these are the players that could drive success or failure for your team this season. And again, PFF grades are great, but I'm not focused on them. For Fashanu and Membou, I want to see how they handle sophisticated pass rushers. I want to see how they do when they're able to block a guy's first move, because one of the biggest differences between playing the offensive line in the NFL and playing the offensive line in college is there's just more sophistication in pass rushers. If you neutralize a guy's first pass rushing move in college, you've usually stopped him. If you neutralize a guy's first pass rushing move in the NFL, usually he's got a plan B. He knows how to attack with a second move. And some of the really high-end players even have a third move if you neutralize their second move. And you see a lot of times like rookie tackles step in, or even second-year guys step into the lineup, and they really struggle right off the bat. It takes them like a year or two to really start to feel comfortable. Even guys who end up being really good players at the tackle position have a lot of growing pains early on. And that's one of the big things, is that you're just facing more sophisticated pass rushers than you ever have in the past. So I've got my eyes on Fashanu and Membou. It's not just about the numbers. It's how do they handle these more sophisticated defensive ends? And I have to say, like, based on how Fashanu ended last season, it felt like he was starting to put the pieces together before he got injured. And I'd be kind of surprised if Fashanu did not end. I'd be surprised if Fashanu wasn't at least a solid left tackle. But there's a difference between being solid and being a high-end guy. The hope is that he'll be a high-end guy. And if he can, again, if he and Membou can both be above average tackles, it has a potential to change things for this Jets offense. On the defensive side of the ball, the guy I really have my eye on is Will McDonald. And the reason for that is he's bulked up this offseason. And it's one of the ongoing things. One of my ongoing points of discussion with Will McDonald over the last couple of years has been his size, because when he was drafted, he was maybe the smallest defensive end in the league. And that was supposed to change last year. You know, at the end of 2023, if you look back at what Robert Saleh said in January of 2024 as the 23 season was ending, it sounded like the Jets were ready for him to come in stronger in 2024. And then he didn't. He came in, still undersized, one of the smallest, maybe the smallest defensive lineman in the NFL last year. Did not stop him from producing as a pass rusher. He put up over 10 sacks. He was productive too. I mean, he got pressure at a solid rate. And getting a high pressure rate is really important, because anybody can have a big sack season with a low pressure rate, but it's tough to sustain that if you're not getting around the quarterback consistently. People dismiss this as like some convoluted analytical thing, but it's really common sense. If you're close to the quarterback more often, you're going to get more sacks over the long run. Maybe you'll have a stretch where you're around the quarterback a lot, a high pressure rate, and you have low sack total for a year. Maybe you have a low pressure rate and you just get lucky and you get a high sack total for 1 year. But over the long run, the guys that get the most sacks are the guys who are producing the most pressures and getting near the quarterback the most. That's not the issue with McDonald. The issue with McDonald was he was just too easy to wash out in the run game. And that's the reason I think the Jets wanted him to bulk up. I mean, there's been talk about like McDonald now adding like a bull rush to his repertoire of pass rushing moves, and that would be great. Look, I think the more quality pass rushing moves you've got, the better off you are. McDonald was a guy with two. I mean, last year McDonald was essentially a guy who either had the speed rush where he just tried to run past the tackle, or a spin move where he set out outside, then if the tackle overset, he'd spin back inside. Going back, kind of the discussion I was having about Fashanu and Membou, what they're facing. McDonald had two good pass rushing moves. Maybe he adds a third this year, but that's less significant to me than can he hold up against the run? How does he look at the point of attack? And a handful of snaps aren't going to make all the difference in the world. A handful of snaps can only tell us so much, but I think we'll be able to see early on, is there a real difference in McDonald's play against the run setting the edge? Because last year he was really a non-factor. Last year he was very easy to run at. And when the Jets had run defense struggles last year, which happened on a more frequent basis than you'd like, there were some games where the Jets shut down the run. On the whole, actually, the numbers don't look bad for their run defense. But if you watch the Jets last year, there were some games where they were hopeless against the run. That was an area where McDonald really struggled. And I think that the Jets made it a focus this offseason to improve that. This game will be our first chance to see that. Now, during the Locked On Jets podcast, we'll talk about the types of players whose performance matters in this game versus those who don't. And there are two very distinct types of players that you should either keep your eye on or be a little skeptical with the results on. And I'll explain who they are as we continue here on this Friday edition of Locked On Jets. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Time to fuel it up and turn it up with 5 Hour Energy Transfusion. It brings the bold grape and ginger and lime flavor of your favorite golf drink minus the alcohol into a quick, energizing shot. Whether you're sinking birdies or just making memories with friends, this one's a hole-in-one for your energy game. And let's be honest, some days on the course or off it, you need that extra boost to stay sharp and energized. Golf is all about good times with good people and good flavors, of course. The grape ginger lime flavor gives you the best parts of your clubhouse go-to without chasing down the bev cart. If you go to 5hourenergy.com today, that's the number 5hourenergy.com, you can use my promo code LOCKEDONGolf to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. Whether you're meeting up with friends trying to turn 18 holes into 36, get the energizing boost you need to power through. Order transfusion-flavored 5-hour energy shots today. This is the Locked On Jets podcast on this Friday. The preseason kicks off for the New York Jets tomorrow night. The Jets are in Lambeau Field to take on the Green Bay Packers. Second time in 5 years the Jets are playing in Green Bay in the preseason. They played there Zach Wilson's rookie year. And ironically, the Jets and Packers did not play a preseason game either the last 2 years where Aaron Rodgers was the Jets quarterback. A bit surprised the NFL didn't stick a Jets-Packers matchup in the preseason either of those years. But the Jets are finally back in action. It's been a long time since we've seen Jets football, but this is not a real game. This is an exhibition game. This is about preparing for the season. It's about getting players ready, and it's also about making decisions. It's about making decisions for position battles and for roster battles. And as we've discussed on the show, there are certain players I think we can draw more conclusions from than others when we leave this exhibition game. I think as much as you're looking for results, you're also looking for how the player got those results. A year ago in the exhibition season, the Jets had 3 undrafted defensive linemen who made the team. They were Leonard Taylor, defensive tackle out of Miami, Braden McGregor, a defensive end out of Michigan, and Craig Watts, a defensive end out of UConn. And I felt like after that preseason, all 3 guys deserved to make the team. But Taylor was the guy who I felt like would produce for the Jets during the regular season. And the reason for that was while McGregor and Watts were just kind of like running over guys, they were playing in the second half of preseason games against guys that just were more talented than. Taylor was winning on technique. Taylor was showing good hand usage. And even though the competition wasn't that great, what he was doing was repeatable. And one of the big differences between college and the NFL is in college, a guy who's immensely talented doesn't need to use good technique because sometimes you'll be going up against guys who just aren't that good and you can just win on raw talent. In the NFL, everybody's good. In the NFL, practically everybody was an elite player in college. Anybody who makes the NFL was an elite player in college, which means you have to use technique. The worst player in the NFL can beat the best player in the NFL if the worst player uses good technique and the best player doesn't. That's one of the reasons, like every single year on a bigger scale, you see massive upsets. You'll see like a 3-win team beating a 12-win team one week because the difference between a good and bad in the NFL is very small. So you have to watch technique, but you also have to put things into context. And let me give you a couple position battles that kind of explain what I'm saying there. At the safety position, the Jets have a battle right now between Tony Adams and Malachi Moore, the day 3 draft pick, for one of the starting spots. How Malachi Moore performs on an NFL field matters quite a bit because it's his first time against the speed, the athleticism of NFL players. Guys can be, you can be a good safety in college. You can take good angles in college. And then suddenly the NFL comes, you're going up against faster players. Suddenly your angles aren't so good. So it'll be interesting to see how Malachi Moore adjusts to the speed of the game. And even against like second and third teamers, when Moore's on the field, that's going to be something worth watching. Because if he shows that, he's playing sound football, if he's a steady presence at the safety position, that's the type of thing that could transfer. Just as Leonard Taylor a year ago was, dominating second and third teamers in the exhibition season, but he was playing with such good technique that you said, even when he goes up against first teamers, he should be able to hold his own. The talent level increase from second to teamers to first teamers means Taylor may not dominate the way he's doing second teamers when he moves up against starters, but he'll at least look like a player who belongs on the field. Whereas if you have like veterans going up against young guys who don't really know what they're doing, that's not as significant. A year ago, the Jets had a guy, Tack McKinley. He was a former first-round pick by the Falcons. He dominated preseason. He actually earned a 53-man roster spot based on his preseason play. But it really didn't matter because he was going up against a bunch of really bad backups. And sometimes what happens in these exhibition games, you get a guy who's like a 5-6-year veteran going up against undrafted rookies. He's going to dominate because he knows how to play. He knows how to use technique. And the young guys really have no idea what they're doing. The young guys are just trying to like carve out a practice squad to stay in the league. So you look at the Jets competition for number 2 receiver. If Alan Lazard and Tyler Johnson go out and dominate a bunch of practice squad level players, as they should if they play deep into games, I think Johnson will play deep into games. I'm expecting Johnson to be like one of the stars of Jets preseason for this reason, because he's a guy who's going to go up against a bunch of undrafted free agent corners in the second and third quarters of these games. He's a guy who's a professional receiver. He's been in the NFL 5 years or so. He knows how to get a release off the line. He knows how to stem a route. He knows how to throw a fake. He knows how to run a crisp route. He'll do really well against corners that don't know what they're doing. But we've seen Tyler Johnson play against, starting caliber players. So we should know that there's going to be a difference between Tyler Johnson dominating guys who don't really know how to play versus guys who are, versus how he'll do in the regular season. And you look at like the competition the Jets have at center between Joe Tippmann and Josh Myers. Now with John Simpson out, it could change the calculus on how the Jets, who plays for how long. They're both going to be in the starting line. I would presume they'll both be in the starting lineup tomorrow, probably with Myers at center and Tippmann at guard in place of Simpson. But if one of them plays against second team defenses, I'm expecting them to play at a very high level because these are starting caliber players who are going up against, guys who will be backups. So all this is to say, there's a certain context you have to watch these games through because there's going to be a lot of noise. There are going to be like 50 storylines people will take from these games, but not all of them are significant. How the rookies perform, how the rookies produce, that's significant. How the position battles with young players go forward, that's significant. How somebody like Will McDonald, who's trying to add an extra element to his game, produces, that's significant. You want to go watch Malachi Corley's route running. If Malachi Corley suddenly is running really, really crisp routes and is getting the ball, that's significant. But Tyler Johnson running crisp routes and getting the ball is not significant. So you have to keep it all in perspective. And I'll end the show by the same way I started the show. If you're going to go crazy over the way Justin Fields plays tomorrow, you'd be best served spending your time on something else because Justin Fields' caliber of play is the least important aspect of this game for the Jets. For Justin Fields, it's about getting ready for the season. It's about getting comfortable with the playbook. And that might entail some struggles. Whereas other guys who are trying to earn a spot on the field and show they belong, again, a Malachi Moore, a Olu Fashanu, an Armand Membou, their caliber of play matters quite a bit because that will drive the Jets season. And it's easier to evaluate that than it is a quarterback who requires a much longer term evaluation. Anyway, that's all for today's episode. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. As always, if you enjoyed the show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening so that you'll never miss an episode. If you enjoy the show and are listening on a podcast source, give it a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. It helps us out, helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Enjoy your weekend. Enjoy the game. We'll be back on Monday to break down the preseason opener between the Jets and the Green Bay Packers.